If you want to learn more about the Blue Beetle, then don't worry because I've read the Wikipedia page so that you don't have to. Woof woof! Hey guys, it's me Marcus, aka the Mad Dog, and we're back with another video. First debuting as a backup feature in issue 83 of Captain Atom, which was released in November 1966, Ted Kord enters the scene as a second incarnation of the Blue Beetle. The first was Dan Garrett, who reached the peak of his popularity during the golden age of comics when he was under the representation of the now defunct publisher, Fox. However, he isn't the go-to when you think of Blue Beetle, so for now we're just going to jump back to Ted Kord, who was a gifted athlete and an inventor with a genius level of intellect. So pretty much like near enough every other superhero that was coming out at the time. Due to his lack of superpowers, he created weapons and gadgets which were designed to look like beetles, which is not too dissimilar to when I did me Who Is Moon Knight, and he created weapons and gadgets that look like the moon. Or when you think about Batman and he does weapons and gadgets that look like a bat. Because Blue Beetle gained some popularity after his appearances in Captain Atom, he was given his own 5-issue miniseries in 1967. They fleshed out his origin story so that Ted was actually the student of the original Blue Beetle, and Ted was bestowed the mantle in Dan Garrett's final moments after he'd been killed whilst investigating Ted's uncle, as he was creating an android army that he was planning to take over the world with. But if we're being honest, how often does someone create an android army without the intention of world domination? And today you might know the Blue Beetle as being part of the DC universe, but during this time he was actually being published and was owned by Charlton Comics, so his popularity during those earlier days was limited to his exposure with other characters within that universe. A notable one being the Question. They teamed up a few times, and the character was actually introduced during Blue Beetle's solo series. And just before Crisis on Infinite Earths had happened, DC had managed to acquire all the characters from Charlton Comics, and use this multiverse shattering event to bring Blue Beetle and other characters into the DC universe. Kord had been recruited from his timeline by the Monitor in his battle to fight the Anti-Monitor, and at the end of the event, with all the universes being crushed into one, Blue Beetle just managed to remain in the DC universe. He was given his own solo series that was written by Len Wein and went on for 24 issues, and was also given a spotlight during Secret Origins, and it gave him exposure to some of the company's biggest characters and managed to appear in some of their series. Ted was now the owner of Kord Industries, which was his father's company, and it was kind of similar like the situation between Bruce Wayne and Wayne Enterprises, so much so that you don't even need to change the father's name because they were both called Thomas. In fact, the scenarios are so similar that Kord Industries was eventually brought by Bruce Wayne, who, you know, between you and me, is Batman. He managed to develop the security system for the JLA HQ, which is surprising considering the fact that the majority of the characters during this time all seem to have their own R&D department. And if you've watched me Who Is Power Girl, you'll see that there's another character in the DC universe who has a pretty similar company. But this was how Ted managed to find his in and become a member of the Justice League, and at some points became their pilot, which seems a bit redundant considering the fact that so many of their members can fly. It was also at this time when one of the best dynamics for this character was introduced, because he became friends with Booster Gold, and they were commonly referred to as Blue and Gold, and no, there's not going to be a prize for guessing why. Despite the fact that this was the most popularity that the character had probably garnered since he was actually created, Ted was mostly relegated to being a side character when he worked for the Justice League, with the next notable thing that happened to him being during the death of Superman, which, you know, spoilers if you didn't know that happened. As Doomsday rampaged across America, Ted tried to intervene but was left in a coma and with a scar running down the back of his skull. Can't lie, as somebody who likes to bet on an underdog, I still would have put all my money on Doomsday. And if you're all looking forward to the reprint of the Death and Return of Superman coming out, you can already pre-order it from the channel's sponsor, Organic Price Books. They've got great packaging, fast shipping, and amazing customer services, and if you use code WOOFWOOF, you'll get $2 off your order. And if you're ordering 3 or more books and you want them to be delivered together, make sure you use code WOOFWOOF, ship it together for 5% off your entire order. Don't worry, you can just copy and paste them from the description down below, and you can use these codes as many times as you like. However, after this, and once Ted was out of the coma, his character was in a bit of a creative limbo. He and Booster joined the side team Extreme Justice, which was led by Captain Atom, and is honestly the most 90s name for a superhero team that I could ever imagine. He was also in a mini-series called Law, which stands for Living Assault Weapon, and honestly, nobody should ever knowingly identify themselves under that title. The series brought together other former Charlton heroes, but it had poor critical reception and not many people were buying it. As we moved into the 2000s, Ted made a few smaller appearances. First in a team known as Super Buddies, and he showed up a handful of times in the Birds of Prey. It was also alluded to that Ted was attracted to Oracle, but because of the fact that I'm a massive Dick Grayson fan and he's pretty much my boy and I'll always defend him, I can't really justify this relationship. But what DC gave Ted with Crisis on Infinite Earths, it took away with Infinite Crisis. In the build up to the event, Ted is held in a Belgian castle and is given an ultimatum by Maxwell Lord to ensure all metahumans are kept under human surveillance and control, And I honestly don't know how Maxwell thought that one would go down, but unsurprisingly, Ted refuses and is shot in the head, which felt a bit mean. However, this did give me one of my favourite Wonder Woman stories with Superman's sacrifice. I think I even recommended it in my Where to Start Wonder Woman. But remember this point in the timeline as it's important when we start talking about Jaime Reyes. And yep, in case you're wondering, I did have to Google how you pronounce that. When the Blue Beetle of the 27th century senses a disruption in the timeline due to Ted's death, linked somehow with the Scarab, which is going to be more important when we talk about Reyes. And yeah, I'm hearing it as I'm saying it out loud, but I never said that this was going to make sense. But this future Blue Beetle recruits Booster Gold and former Blue Beetle Dan Garrett, along with the newest incarnation of the hero Jaime Reyes. And the three of them go back in time to rescue Ted just before he was killed. However, this did mess up the timeline of Infinite Crisis because then it was never revealed that Maxwell Lord was evil, and that meant that in the new future he could take over because his plan was never stopped. Because of this, Ted decides to accept his fate to restore balance to the timeline, but again, this isn't permanent because it's pretty much confirmed straight away that he survived. However, after this, Ted was relegated to mostly appearing alongside Booster Gold. He received a Black Lantern ring during Blackest Night, but that really doesn't mean too much because a lot of people got these, including me. The New 52 then happened, which despite being my jam, probably wasn't Ted Cord's. He wasn't even mentioned for 3 years until 2014 during Forever Evil, and his character was young once again and dealing with Lex Luthor over at Cord Industries. And again, unfortunately, there wasn't too much of note for Ted Cord during the Rebirth era. He did take up the mantle of Blue Beetle once again for Heroes in Crisis, and did have a handful of moments against Dr. Manhattan. In Dark Knight's Death Metal, Ted was killed once again, but this time by Robin King, and was also resurrected quite quickly by Batman in a Black Lantern ring. So I wonder how powerful this actually is. The reason why Ted was sidelined quite a bit was due to the emergence of a new Blue Beetle that was created for a younger audience. Jaime Reyes originally debuted in issue 3 of Infinite Crisis in February 2006, and later took up the mantle of Blue Beetle in issue 5 of that same event. But to create his place in the universe, the mythos of Blue Beetle had to be changed a bit. The Scarab, which is another word that I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly, and grants Blue Beetle his powers, now had to be changed so that it was a part of an alien technology, which gives the user the powers of the Blue Beetle. It's now actually an alien device which bonds to its host and gives them a suit of armor. And Reyes is a high school student from El Paso, Texas. He lives with his garage worker father, paramedic mother, and his younger sister. And at one point in the past, the Scarab had been taken by Ted Cord to Shazam. And at one point in the past, the Scarab had been taken by Ted Cord to the Scarab had been taken by Ted Cord to Shazam. And at one point in the past, the Scarab that we were just talking about had been taken by Ted Cord to be looked after and protected by Shazam. Then there was a battle between the Spectre and Shazam, and the Scarab, which now has a mind of its own, was lost in the fallout, which led to it being in the possession of Reyes. Booster Gold tried to reclaim it, having seen the potential that it could have in the future, but when he confronted Reyes, he saw that it had been infused into his spine. But this turned out to be a blessing in disguise, as both Jaime and the Scarab were essential in helping the heroes of Infinite Crisis locate Brother Eye and also destroy it. But the powers that the Scarab had bestowed to him were really difficult to control at first, not too dissimilar from the views on a YouTube video, so help your boy out and share this video where you can. The main ability that it gives him is a suit of armor that forms around him, primarily when it can sense danger. The suit can also create an array of weapons and gadgets like an energy cannon, a sword and a grappling hook, and more over the course of time. It's like that TX in Terminator 3, except for the fact that some people still remember that the Blue Beetle exists. The blue energy that the suit produces can deflect magic, it can negate kryptonite, and it also detects interdimensional objects. And the suit can also produce wings for flight and has an infiltrator mode that causes the Beetle to become taller, grow spikes, increase strength, and operate whilst Jaime isn't even conscious. The Scarab does have an aversion to Green Lanterns and their energy, and not just because one's a primary colour but the other isn't. And this led into Reyes' first ongoing series during the 1 year later era, when he had a fight with Guy Gardner because his ring had a reaction to the Scarab. But I think that's just an excuse because I genuinely believe that Guy Gardner would probably have a fight with the Mirror. His early adventures saw him fighting crime on the streets and saw him teaming up with people like Oracle and the Phantom Stranger, and established his own support team of local superheroes that was known as the Posse. However, Jaime's story really started when Guy Gardner explained about the Reach, a race of cybernetic aliens that have been at war with the Guardians of the Universe since they were created. There is a loose truce between the two forces which prevents prevents the Reach from invading Earth. But truth seems just like rules are made to be broken. Due to the Reach's control over the AI function of the Scarab, Jaime travels through the bleed to attack them. There's a lot of back and forth, but eventually the link is broken, which allows the Scarab to bond with Jaime and actually develop its own personality. Now an established member of the DC universe, Reyes is trained by the Teen Titans and eventually joins them. And it was this point where he travelled through time to save Ted Kord, but we talked about that earlier, so I'd recommend just going back if you weren't properly listening. Don't worry, I don't listen to my voice either. And he establishes another key villain in the Black Beetle, but not the one from Big Bad Beetleborgs. It's not these two guys just going at it, but now that I think about it, there is quite a lot of similarities. But he is from the future and he blames the death of his sister on Reyes, which is why he bonds with the Reach to prevent it from happening. He first appeared during all of that time travelling shenanigans, and it was pretty much the most prolific time for this character, because not much else of note happened for Reyes until the New 52. And this was the time when I was first introduced to this character, because the New 52, yes, I've said it a couple of times, is definitely my jam, and it's when I started to learn about a lot of characters. Reyes remained the Blue Beetle and the origin story was tweaked slightly. Not much else was retconned or changed about the Blue Beetle's suit, and Jaime is actually recruited for the Justice League International by Booster Gold. Some of his stories include him taking on OMAC, reaching out to the Ted Kord of this universe, and also having some nightmares about Dr. Fate, which we've all been there. However, since DC Comics moved into the Rebirth era, pretty much all incarnations of the Blue Beetle have been sidelined. He was given another ongoing series, but this ended at issue 18. Jaime was seen working alongside and being mentored by Ted Kord to try and remove the Scarab, but once again the origin story was tweaked a bit. Now the Beetle was magical rather than it being alien by design, and if I'm being honest, not much else of note has happened for this character. The biggest recent news for Blue Beetle possibly ever, and we're not just talking about the comics, but it's the announcement that he should be getting his own live action movie as part of the DC Extended Universe. Miguel from Cobra Kai was cast as Reyes, and hopefully that's the reason why you found this video in the first place. But honestly, I remember when DC said that there was supposed to be 10 films that should have been released by now, so until I see a trailer, or until I'm sat in the cinema and I'm actually watching the film, I don't fully believe it's going to happen. I swear there's about 30 or so films that they've announced and are in pre-production with at the moment. But hopefully it does happen, because this is a great character that I think is very underrated and deserves a bit more of the spotlight. But until next time, just make sure that you stay safe and stay mad, all you dogs. Woof woof! See you at the next video.